Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we're discussing Flight of the Navigator. It was released in 1986, directed by Randall Glazer, starring Jerry Kramer, Paul Reubens, and Clifton Young. This movie is about Chrome Spaceship that sounds like a popular 80s icon. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 37-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. I think my first question for you both is, when was the last time you went to a dog frisbee show? Because if that wasn't the theme of the movie that I thought we were watching, what is? Is this something you partake in? Was it on like ESPN plus and you ended up watching one of those? No?
That's exactly what I was about to say from Dodgeball.
We had an opening that Bobby was creating a frustration point for you. They were doing a lot of fake outs, right? What were the fake outs?
They wanted you to think that ordinary objects were UFOs. So they had the very first shot of the flying like a metallic frisbee flying from kind of far away, so you couldn't really see it very well. Thought it was a frisbee until they got closer and closer and closer, and then it was a frisbee. And then they did the same thing with a big shadow, and it turned out to be a blimp. And then they did it a third time with a water tower, where you just kind of saw the top of a water tower, and it looked like a... But then I was sad they didn't just keep doing it the entire movie.
Wait, what? I don't believe you. I just heard the frustration in your voice, and then I actually wanted more.
I was like, wow, they're really going for the whole spaceship thing. But it was almost like the tone of it was different. It was like, oh, the spaceship is ominous and scary and stuff. And that wasn't this movie.
What do they call them now? We don't call them UFOs anymore, right? UFOs. What do we call them? No, nobody help me out. It's something different. It's like, oh my gosh. Well, someone will look that up while we're searching. We'll continue on with their story. We meet our hero, David Freeman, who really seems to have a interesting family dynamic. Sort of parents who are aloof, who don't pay attention to their kids, and a little brother who's a bully to the older brother because he just wants to teach his dog how to play with frisbees. Was that anyone's family dynamic? Bobby, were you picked on by your younger sibling?
No, not so much, but I had a pretty big difference in age. I guess it was like 5 years, so it was a little bit much for that. But now you think of the dog frisbee thing, I got to go back to that. Like,
okay, yeah.
So was that like the main character's idea to bond with his dog? Like, I'm confused why they were doing that. Because the rest of them were just in the stands watching him do that. So I'm inclined to think that it was like entirely his idea to make him think that he could do this whole thing.
Do you mean like he convinced his family, let's go to the dog frisbee show?
Yeah, basically. That's what it seemed like to me.
That makes sense. To entertain him and give him, some structure. You have to raise and take care of your dog. Remember, he had to feed the dog out of the frisbee at some point. So I guess that makes sense.
And maybe that's why his brother was mad, because he was dragged to a frisbee dog show all day.
I love that we're like getting into the weeds of how this family dynamic really is. They're just terrible to each other. Little brother's a jerk off. What do they call each other? Scuzzbutt? No, is that too cruel? Was it that?
Scuzzbucket, I think.
Oh, Scuzzbucket, yeah. See, Scuzzbutt feels like something I would have said. Did you find it, Matt? Is it UFO?
Is a UAP.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what we
does not roll off the tongue at all. I'm sorry.
Wait, what does that stand for?
Unidentified aerial phenomenon? I'm
something like
totally
that.
Just going with it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
UAP.
Unidentified anomalous phenomena. Yeah.
Wow, anomalous. Yeah. So this movie is about UAPs. We see a kid who's clearly a very nice kid, right? And trying to figure out his way. He's starting to like girls. They got fireworks to light off because it's 4th of July. And his brother was playing with his jerk friends, and he was being a jerk to him. But he's got to go get him. And he's, crossing train tracks with his Australian Shepherd. And his brother scares him, and then he gets knocked out. He gets knocked out in little ravine, and then now all the shenanigans happen. You know, we talk about the family and that dynamic, and you know, he was kind enough to go get his brother. We jump ahead, but we don't know this yet.
Mhm.
He wakes up clearly concussed, and he goes home. And there's a big old surprise. Now I'm thinking back to when I saw this as a kid, and talk about hitting on like being a kid and being afraid of losing your family. They leaned
Right.
heavy on like the darkness of that part of it.
Right.
Right? I don't know that I like that so much.
Yeah, well, as a parent, I find that pretty disturbing. You know, like a parent's worst nightmare is to say, yeah, sure, you can go outside for a couple minutes and then not follow them outside and then never see them again.
But isn't this one of those weird things where that is what we did as kids?
Yeah,
Where
for sure.
we
No,
went outside for a lot longer than a few minutes
No,
without
I-
any
I
parental
remember-
supervision.
I remember being told by my parents, go outside. Like,
Get out of here.
Mhm.
just go. Don't come back until dinner time or whatever, you know? Like,
Mhm.
and like,
Mhm.
granted, I was like a larger male, so like I wasn't really, and I lived in like a relatively nice area, so like no one was worried about me like too much, and I'm not the kind of guy that gets into trouble. So
I was gonna say, so you were the
to-
one sowing the chaos.
to give my parents a little bit of credit, but no, they're like, yeah, just go outside, just leave and don't come back until.
I just seeing the fear. I think I definitely remember getting lost sometimes. I remember getting lost at a mall as a kid, and how terrifying that is to be away from your parents. So could you imagine coming home and the people in your house are not the people that you know?
No, that's nightmare fuel right there.
I don't know why, but I thought of Back to the Future 2, during that
Mhm.
scene when Marty
Uh-huh.
comes back to the alternate 1985, and there's a whole different family like there. It's funny because I don't know why I was expecting it to go even darker during this.
No, really?
Mm.
Because like his family was still fine, right? Like they were, I mean, yeah, they were older, but and they were living in, I guess, a less nice house, I think.
It seems that way, right? It seems like they moved underneath the freeway,
Yeah.
which is like never the best place to move to.
Oh man.
But I was borderline expecting like one of the parents to be gone, or, you know, both the parents to be like, maybe if more time had passed, like maybe it had been like 15 years, maybe the brother was the only one still alive.
Well, is it weird when you saw the parents for the first time, their older version? Was I the only one that thought maybe they were like using some substances? No,
Went straight
Oh,
there.
Oh.
And here's where the
But
darkness.
it
This is
is-
our my poor adult mind that has been torn asunder, that did not see that as a kid, outside of being terrified of the idea of losing your family.
I mean, it is kind of like a trope in movies that, and I mean, maybe this is true for real life too, that the couple doesn't last after that kind of thing, right? A la Indiana
Mhm.
Jones. So, spoiler.
No.
I was like, whoa, dang,
Hey,
dude. This is
maybe I should-
this is re-review, not future.
Yeah,
Come on, man.
I was not ready for that one.
Okay,
The next key here is he reconnects with his family. We had the weird, introduction of there were missing posters. The police are like, look at the year that he went missing, and really pointing out to us that, well, he hasn't changed, but we're 8 years into the future. Gets with his family, and it's immediately, I guess we have to let him take tests to figure out what's going on. And what felt so suspect to me was that they're like, oh, let's do memory tests. I'm like, why are you doing memory tests when you can clearly tell it's been 8 years and this kid hasn't aged? I was like, come on, y'all.
Well, so there's the two different halves, right? There's when he went to the normal hospital,
Mhm.
and then there's when he went to, for whatever reason, NASA. And so you had yeah, I think, because what was it? The brother had brought up hormones or something.
Mhm.
Like that maybe it might have been a thing where like maybe he just, it was a hormone thing or something that made him just not age. Like he's actually 20, but he just looks 12 still.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that part was weird. And it felt kind of strange that, it wasn't so much about a health check. It was to try to find
No.
answers. And like you would think after 8 years, thinking your kid was dead, you'd be like, no, he's not leaving the house. Like
Right, for sure.
there's no way.
Mhm.
And then then it goes to the next level when NASA steps in and they're like, yeah, we want to try to find answers. At least that was kind of presented as like why all that stuff had kind of happened. But then all of a sudden NASA was the MIB version of NASA, I guess.
Yeah, I wish that NASA was more of like a benevolent, like, hey, we're here to help you kind of situation instead of like, the MIB, FBI, whatever they were, like giving NASA all sorts of like clandestine power.
We're getting into the conspiracy nature of NASA in this film.
Yeah.
This is the like fake moon landing, like we're like doctoring Photoshop pictures, NASA.
To be fair, if you look at the era, it's not unusual because you had the same thing in like ET and Close Encounters. It wasn't unusual to see NASA have kind of this almost militant arm that kind of existed out there where they were going above and beyond. And to be fair, this was still the era of the Cold War. It was an era where, you had this sense of, especially in movies like these that featured aliens or whatever, the idea of like there was no close contact or anything like that. Like it was very much in the sense of, invasions. And I guess that's traditional for most alien movies. Shocking that wasn't even a thing in this. The whole idea that it had like no one on NASA's team ever seemed to have a fear that somehow this was going to end with the world ending or enslavement or anything that you would see in like, I don't know, a Roland Emmerich movie.
Mm-hmm. And as we get into it, if you look at Max's motivation, it could very, very much be world ending at some point here based on what he's doing to other civilizations. Well, we'll get into that, but does give an opportunity to talk about technology as a whole.
Yes.
We are at the regular hospital, and they're checking his brainwaves. And in that regular hospital, they are now getting 3D printouts on their screens because somehow he's able to take over. Oh, what was it? One of the texts was like, oh, he's sending binary code to our machines. Does that happen at a regular hospital? They got the super IT guy there?
It's because the like whoever created the Navigator was like a highly intelligent species. So this is all that stuff is good. We don't have to question it because they explained it. They're just really smart.
I love it when Bobby just takes the movie in as a whole and just believes in the premise that they present to you.
They said they're just really smart. So there you go. Everything's explained now.
We could jump back one skosh because we do get introduced to the ship, right? We have a rent-a-cop, someone who's just patrolling, or a guard who's the one who finds it because it crashed into a tower. What was your impression when you first saw the ship?
I mean, I thought it was fine. I mean, like it's kind of like a neat, like it's obviously like a play on the typical like spherical UFO whatever the hell UAP or UAP
well, whatever thing. IKEA, whatever it is.
And I kind of liked that it seemed like it was a play off of the spherical saucer, but kind of like more of like an organic, like almost like Fibonacci, like swirl, like shell kind of design to it. So I kind of dug it, and I liked the fact that it was like, I don't know, morphed before morphing was a thing, and it kind of like turned into a little bit more aerodynamic, like kind of like when it was ready to go into super speed kind of thing.
I love the design of it. I think that it works really well in the way that it was put together. I did think that, and I have to give leeway for the time and the effects at the time, is when there was an actual, because I mean, I think Bobby, you're the one who shared the link about the behind the scenes or whatever for this movie a while back. And when you saw the practical ship, it was more of a, I don't know what you'd call it in car terms or whatever, but it was definitely a little bit more matte than it was.
Like a matte chrome?
Yeah, like it definitely wasn't like shiny chrome, but whenever you got to the CG version, it was shiny chrome.
Right.
And again, the time, I'm sure, they didn't have the kind of, approach to doing that sort of texture and, reflective maps or whatever that would go onto it nowadays. But yeah, I thought it looked pretty cool. This was like the T1000 before there was a T1000.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe,
To even get into the shifting that they show you.
I know. Did this inspire the T1000 for James
that
Cameron?
Would be amazing.
It was pretty impressive. All that stuff was pretty impressive, I thought. When you think of it as more of like the photochemical, like compositing era, and like all the stuff that they had to do, like I think there's a lot of like hidden wizardry in this movie that like we just kind of take for granted these days because, like someone with a Mac laptop can do some of this stuff. But I think that in the photochemical compositing era, the stuff was like really hard. Like I know there were some like forced perspective shots and some other kind of like various like trickery and compositing and in-camera stuff that's not typically done these days, I think.
Mm-hmm. So NASA locks David up in a very creepy room with a two-way mirror, but he gave him a lot of cool toys.
A lot of cool toys.
Worth it to me, man. Shoot.
Mommy's like, sign me up for this creepy room.
Yeah. Someone's just going to bring me food and then they're going to give me all these toys. I'm down with this.
He never got the McDonald's though. So that's a deal breaker.
McDonald's.
Yeah.
And so we do meet Sarah Jessica Parker, who is playing Carolyn McAdams, who is the guide for a robot, or the person who hangs out with the robot.
What is she, the intern, they said?
And she just has to monitor that the robot can go where it needs to go on its own, even though we learn later that it absolutely can go very long distances on its own.
Well, they said it makes mistakes, so it's gotta.
So she's got to be there to take care of it. Now, she ends up being the person that helps him. I'm going to put this in quotes, escape. But that whole process, I think I wrote down, how did she know to have the machine send him to the saucer? Like, if her goal was helping him to get out, why wasn't it like, oh, I need to go deliver to the security guard gate so you can run away? Why was it like, let me take you into the specific hangar?
Oh, I just assumed he instructed her to do that because it was communicating with him. Did I make a
okay?
Did I make a leap of plot hole faith there?
Matt, what happened? Help me out.
I don't know, to be honest. Like, I guess I'm like you. I just kind of assumed. I don't know. There was a few weird things about that whole sequence that didn't quite add. I mean, I think you even brought it up, the fact that it just kind of went from point A to point B. Like the lack of security in this entire place was almost comical, and the fact that he was able to get into the robot and then it go to exactly where he wanted. I mean, I guess to give it credit or whatever, I'm sure that it had to make deliveries in these places or whatever. So it's probably pre-programmed for some of these spots, but I don't know. It was a weird sequence. It was just to get him there, I guess. That robot was weird.
The only thing we could do. Yes. Well, okay. This is where we eventually get introduced to the robot we care about. I'm calling him a robot. We could call it a sentient alien species.
How
if you
dare
want.
you, sir? That's a derogatory term, sir.
He gets into the ship because this is where he'd been for 4 hours in his time, 8 years in Earth time, because he was traveling near the speed of light to unknown star maps that we as humans haven't done yet. And the ship just says, hey, come on in. And he does, because what else would you do as an inquisitive kid? And then we get introduced to Max. What was your reaction when you first heard Max's voice?
What's weird? I thought he always had the Paul Rubin voice the entire time.
Too. Yeah.
So when he had a very like automaton level voice and a way of speaking to him, it kind of threw me for a loop because I was imagining the Pee Wee Herman off the bat.
Yeah.
And I was like,
kind of like the automaton
version
situation though. Yeah.
Better than
compliance.
I did actually. Yes.
Well, that does let me ask this question, because I think as a kid, being a fan of Pee Wee Herman as a kid, I was like, oh man, this is all Pee Wee Herman out. That's fantastic. As an adult, is it me or did they go full Pee Wee Herman? Like, why did they do it so much?
Yeah. No, they really did. And it was a little bit much, I think. And I think that's why I like the automaton, because I have the comparison between the two.
It drove me a little batty. Because it's one of those where the first time and you're like, oh, look, Pee Wee Herman, how funny. But they brought the laugh in just over and over and over again. And I couldn't. I just couldn't. I wanted the same thing. I wanted the regular, just give me a robot voice. Sorry, sentient robotic species thing. Sorry, Matt.
Is that like part of the ship? Like it never leaves the ship? It's like it is the ship? Or
I
is
mean,
it
I
like
guess,
its own
okay,
thing?
now I'm the one making assumptions. Yes, that's what I thought.
I mean, it seems like it, right? It doesn't like it can't separate from the ship.
Okay, do you think there was a species back on Phalon?
Yeah, I think there was some kind of like alien that built this thing to do its work for it.
So let's talk about its work. Its work is to get an example of a species from a planet and then return it back to its planet after it's studied it or harvested its brain for storage, for data storage. Is that the understanding?
Yeah, to try to see like what species it could like store star maps in or something.
Well, but I don't know if that was necessarily the intention, because the way that it was presented when when Max brought that up to him was the idea that they were like, okay, well, when examining you, we found that you only used 10% of your brain, and we felt that was a terrible waste of space. So we just crammed a bunch of data in there to basically, make you useful. Or to,
right, that's why he needed it back to leave, not why they started it to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So he did a transfer, not a copy.
Kind of seems
that's
that
a
way.
bad mistake on his end.
You got to have backups, man. Backups.
So we're thinking there is like an actual alien species who created Max so that Max could go out, discover creatures that they can study, and then put them back in their correct timeline.
Right. And then they just come back with all this data that the aliens can research. And they don't have to risk maybe they get vaporized in the time travel, the aliens do. So they have to have the robots do it for them.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. They can get other species that could also potentially be vaporized, but they themselves are 100% capable of being vaporized, so they don't do it. I like it. I see where you're going there. I'm totally okay with it. Let's talk about the thing that I feel like is the key of enjoyment of me watching this film as a child. Did you or did you not want to fly the ship? I kind of wanted to fly the ship.
I liked the two. It's kind of been done in other movies, but I like the two joysticks as opposed to the singular one that's in the middle. I thought that was kind of a unique design.
You mean instead of using a regular helicopter design?
Right.
Or like a yoke or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did, to be honest. I do remember distinctly loving the way that the ship morphed during the different modes or whatever.
Yeah.
I also very much remember as a kid thinking that chair looks very uncomfortable, and I still feel that way.
Yes. It looks so uncomfortable.
No lumbar support.
But I did want to walk and touch the ship. It looked super tactile. So since it was all chrome, it'd just be fingerprints everywhere. And Max is yelling to get out the microfiber to clean it up. Make it shiny again, please. It looks terrible. Yeah, I think I totally wanted to fly the ship more than anything. We have just interesting moments. He's flying about. They spend a lot of time with just Earth confusion. Oh, I'm up in space 20 miles. Now I'm away 20 miles here. And oh, now we're in Tokyo. And let's go to the Golden Gate Bridge.
That was kind of a fun way to show off what the ship could do and show off some awesome helicopter footage. But I did feel like it kind of dragged on a bit.
That helicopter footage, though. How much money do you think they spent on that?
The entire budget.
Right.
It was CG and the budget for the helicopters, and that was it. And they spent $20 on the actors.
It's like,
It was like scenic shot after scenic shot after scenic shot of just a helicopter flying through.
They're like, we have this scene where we're going to land on the alien planet and meet with the aliens. Oh wait, but we need the helicopter footage, so we'll just cut the alien scene.
To the point that we even commented that they had to run it through the entire credits. But before we get to the credits, he makes it back. And he makes a very important decision because Max told him, you need to stay with your family. That's where you belong. It's too dangerous for you to time warp. And he decides to take the risk that because this family is not the family he knows from 8 years ago, he needs to take the chance on getting vaporized to go back home to his actual family. When we think of time travel, was I the only one going, timeline, the timeline? What are you doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Altering the future.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the part of me that's a nerd now, I feel like there's so much stuff, in astrophysics that you could totally just play with in this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if a 90-minute movie for kids would really delve into that all too much. Because there's the whole idea that like technically, even if you went back in time, this might be a slightly alternate version of it, and butterfly effect, and somehow the ship going through time or whatever slightly affected in a different way. Or I don't know, I guess the part of it that kind of bothered me is when you look at some of the movies that are in the same realm as this movie, E.T., Close Encounters, I feel like they I think Steven Spielberg said it's like at the end of the day, like, E.T. wasn't a movie about an alien, it was a movie about a family going through divorce or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's something that this movie was kind of lacking a little bit, that it didn't have that thing that like, he didn't run away from home, right? He didn't go through a scenario where I feel like, they would have thought that maybe he had left or something.
Yeah.
And so like, I feel like the cathartic nature of his return was just kind of like nothing really changed. Nothing, like he just has, a little alien now.
And he gets he has a love for his family.
Right. He seems like he's going to be better off with his brother because he realizes that his brother isn't just a total pain.
Yeah, but his brother was the problem in the first place. So like, it's not like he was a problem for his brother, but then again, I mean, back to the Future, when Marty comes back and like his family is, whatever they were when he came back, wearing suits and ties and rich, and I guess being rich makes you happy. So, and better. They had more cars now, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to leave that loaded statement alone. Is it me or was Max when the actual time travel is happening, which kudos to the moving through space time with the lightning triggering, as a kid, and I still kind of felt this when he's going through that process and the red comes over the eye and the water's like spinning. I just always thought at that point Max was turning evil. I can't help it. I know red shouldn't be seen that way, but it just felt ominous, even though he was trying to do right by the kid.
I mean, I think he was red in the beginning when you first see him too. So that might have been some like trying to be like, okay, you're not sure if this is a bad situation for the kid or a good situation.
So 2 questions. First one is, why do they hate geeks so much? They were just mean.
There was a lot of hate in this movie towards a lot of different groups.
Actually, there was. That probably is the more problematic portion of this. There were some not some great jokes going on for what was a kid's movie, and it lasts. I think the other thing I'll ask is, should we get a remake of this? It'd be fun for kids again, right?
I was thinking about this as we were watching it, remake versus a sequel. Where we get a adult version of oh my god, why am I forgetting his name? David. And Max comes back for whatever reason, versus a reboot. Because like I could see a reboot, but like I wonder like what story do you tell to make it work? Because I feel like this movie had a lot of stuff, but I feel like the the central story of it, like I couldn't really tell you what the actual plot of this movie was.
Right.
Like I can tell you things that happened, but I like, for example, like was Max needing to get back to his planet in order to save them? Or, did David need to get back to his house in order to make it in time to prevent his family from getting arrested? Or, any number of things. Like there was no, plot line for it to follow. There was, the time travel stuff, like that part of it was interesting. But then by the end of it, I was like, I really don't know where this story is actually really going. So maybe in a sequel, you could actually have it where, I don't know, maybe the whole press, like the thing that kind of triggers everything is the fact that him and his brother get into a fight and the brother falls off cliff and dies or something. And so like they take him back right before that happens. So he could, stop that from happening, or any, just something like maybe a remake would kind of benefit from that, having a more coherent reason for the movie to kind of exist. Plus more, drone shots, got to get all those 8K drone shots now.
I mean, it would be nice.
But I think a sequel could be interesting too, to kind of see, a grown up David. Cause like this was 78, he was 12. So what would he be now? Like
old.
Yeah. So his 60s. So have Max come back to visit him before he dies or something. And then have, his grandson or, a neighbor or something kind of have an adventure with Max.
I was waiting for you to spin this to start describing the Adam Project.
They need to bring that little puppet guy back.
Puppet guy?
Yeah, the
little creature with the strings that we could see.
Yeah. They tried.
They did try. It was okay.
Well, like I was saying, like I'd love to see them do Max with an actual modern robotic arm with all the stuff that we have, for precise control and everything.
Yeah, it's I think it's time to ask the question, Bobby. You watching this with your kids, or you just watching this on your own because you love the Navigator so much?
I'm watching this on my own. Too much swearing, so for my kids. So
what, a whole one?
A whole one, but that is a lot.
There's kids' cartoons with more than that these days.
No, I mean, I wasn't sure coming back to this movie again. It's been a super long time since I've seen it, but I was pretty entertained throughout. So I wouldn't mind watching this again and putting it in. I mean, like, it's got its like 80s quirk, but to me, it's more of like a weird time situation than it is like the movie sucks. So the
80s quirk is a good way of looking at it. Matt, you recommending this one?
I love this movie as a kid, and I was 50% scared, 50% excited to watch this again. I couldn't tell you when I watched this last. I'll say 30 years ago. Honestly, I would rather see the remake or the sequel at this point than recommend this, I think.
It's tough because I think the things that made me love it as a kid are still in there, right? That kind of gave me that excitement of it, and like I said, the things we liked about the ship and how it morphed, and really just that desire to fly it. But as an adult, especially with some of the crass humor that we did get, and kind of going like, well, we could probably do this a little bit differently. I'd still watch it, but can someone please just either remake it or do the sequel? Just do it for us, because I think in this day and age, it can be elevated to a whole other tier. With that said, as always, thank you for listening. And remember, I do not leak, you leak.